What would need to be done to build your 1 million solopreneur brand?
Over 7 years ago, I was living in Amsterdam and I had my first corporate job. So I was working as a recruiter for a Dutch recruitment company and I absolutely hated it. I had to be there at the office every day at 8:30 a.m. sharp, and if I would be 1 minute late, I would have to buy coffee for the entire team. And I just felt so trapped and lost because I felt like everything was kind of decided for me.
Is there one thing that you want to say yet to everyone?
Yeah, I would say go out there and build your brand.
Right here we have Agnes from Austria, who lived in Lisbon, Amsterdam, Australia, and many more, but right now we're in Bali. She done a lot of things from the corporate recruitment world to now being a marketing consultant and building up to a 1 million solopreneur journey business, right?
Yes, exactly. Thanks so much for having me.
And the 1 million journey, it's not where we are right now, but it's what you're building up to. But the build up towards making such a bold statement, that's actually really cool. Because it started all in Amsterdam, actually.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so the funny part was, at this point, it's like over 7 years ago, I was living in Amsterdam and I had my first corporate job. So I was working as a recruiter for a Dutch recruitment company and I absolutely hated it. I had to be there at the office every day at 8:30 a.m. sharp. And if I would be 1 minute late, I would have to buy coffee for the entire team. And I just felt so trapped and lost because I felt like everything was kind of decided for me. And after 1 year...
In what way was everything decided for you? Like the whole way towards that corporate job, or?
So in the end, I realized that I was just micromanaged a lot because with every day I had to structure every half hour of my day. I had to double check this with my manager. Whenever I would call a candidate, I would then have to pitch it to someone in the internal recruitment team before this person could be booked in for an interview with a hiring manager. So I just didn't have any freedom or creativity in my function.
So it was literally like, you need to do this. That's it.
Exactly. But then obviously you also have targets. So you need to do this way, but then the expectation is this is the target, right? Without you ever being really creative in it.
Yeah, because you ended up in that corporate job because you just came to the Netherlands, you studied, then you got the corporate job, you did it for 1 year.
Exactly.
But how did you felt after that 1 year?
Yeah, I just felt really lost. Like, if this is what I have to do for the rest of my life, I don't think I can. And I just decided to go back to university because at the time my ex-boyfriend actually worked as a consultant. I saw that he had a lot of different projects. He was then working partly on-site with clients and he just had so much more flexibility and creativity. So I thought that this might be something that I might enjoy too.
So then you started a master degree, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I did like a year of strategy and organization master at the Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam.
Free University of Amsterdam, translated.
Yes, and the funny part was within the course of my master thesis, I had to interview entrepreneurs about their fears and failures because that's what my master thesis ended up being about.
What was the main subject specifically?
How the fear of failure influences founders and their decision making.
What was the outcome?
For me personally, it really shifted my perspective because I thought that these founders are just kind of somehow smarter than the rest. And I noticed that they just also have a bunch of fears and they have insecurities, but they just deal with them differently, and most of the time they just don't show it to the world. And once I actually heard about it behind closed doors, obviously, it really shifted my own self-belief in what I can do and what's possible for me.
Yeah. So you talked to all those founders in Amsterdam. What was the thing that got triggered after all those conversations? Because then you do your master's degrees, you study for 1 year. Actually, I dropped out, so I don't know how that works. You study for 1 year, and then you're like, okay, shit, now I have all this knowledge. I've talked to all those people. What happened inside of you? What happened internally?
So actually, it was really the environment. So I was back then going to this co-working space. That's where I met most of the people, and I really didn't want to leave because I felt like I belonged there. I was really happy. I was very inspired, and I wanted to find a way to stay in that space and to be one of them.
In what way were you inspired by all the stories and all the things that you learned from them?
It's actually by how some of them thought, how they spoke, how they acted. It was a very relaxed and fun way to work instead of what you know from the corporate world.
Okay, so it's way more relaxed, way more thinking of what they're saying and what they're doing in a more strategic way, maybe? I don't know, you talked to them, I was not there.
Yeah, so the best way how I can describe it, it's kind of like if you have a couple of friends and then they are a little bit entrepreneurial and they have a complementary skill set to yours, right? So for example, you're good at marketing and sales, and then maybe you know someone who's good at product, and then you know someone who's, for example, good at marketing as well, right? And then you get together and you have a bunch of ideas, and then actually within a month you have something working and you start selling it actively on the market, right? Just you brainstorming with friends, and then things are happening. And once you do that, you actually have a lot of freedom, and you feel like a part of you is, right, in this product, whatever you're selling. And yeah, that's kind of the feeling that I experienced for the first time, what that's actually like.
So after talking to all those entrepreneurs, you saw two things actually. One, they experienced more freedom, even though they have all the fears and all the doubt that normal people also have.
Exactly.
Because in the end, they're just people.
Yeah.
They both go to the toilet, need to take a shit sometimes. That's how it works. Like, that's how humans work.
Exactly.
Okay, and after that realization, you were done with your master thesis. You've learned those lessons. What happened then?
So a friend that I met at the time, he had a small company. They were with like 10 people, and they had a business coach. And he actually connected me with a business coach, and he was like, hey, just have a conversation with him and see where it leads. And at the time, I figured out that I actually really liked interviewing in itself, because I was learning new things, I was meeting inspiring people, it was diverse, every day was different. And then I just had a brainstorming session, and we came up with the idea that I could actually start a podcast.
How strange. Starting a podcast to meet people and learn things. Okay. Besides the jokes, but then you started a podcast on YouTube, right?
Yes. So it was like video and audio back then. This was, I mean, over 5-6 years ago, which means that podcasts weren't as big back then as they are now.
Yeah. But then you had no study to do? Did you have a side job back then or not?
No, I was just fully focused on it.
Okay. How did you keep your head afloat?
So I still had savings back then.
Smart.
And then I also, got a sponsor as well for a couple of episodes.
How did you manage to do that? Because in the beginning, you don't have an audience, you
Yeah.
don't have anything, but you still got a sponsor.
Yeah, so it was actually very opportunistic. I had two bigger names on my podcast that were known in the Amsterdam ecosystem. And I knew one specific company, they were actually looking for talent in growth hacking. And then I got someone on the podcast who was very big in the growth hacking space. And then I told him, hey, by the way, I'm going to interview XYZ person, and he's going to share my podcast in his network on LinkedIn, which means that all the people that follow him will see it, they will listen, and it would be a great opportunity for a sponsor to be present who's looking for marketing talent.
So you already sold like the traffic you generated through the person without even having the person on the podcast yet. Still everything you need to record, no proof of concept at all. But just like, hey, this could work for you. And then you close the sponsorship actually.
Yeah, on the spot.
On the spot. And that was the first sponsorship and also the last sponsorship for the podcast, or did you do that more often?
So that was like the first one, because later I actually stopped focusing on getting sponsors, but I shifted the model. So I actually started more working as an agency with founders and coaches to get them booked on podcasts. And then at some point, the podcast transformed a little bit. So I was also at the same time using it to get in touch with other podcasters, to build a relationship with them so I could place guests on their podcasts.
So it actually became more of a marketing and a networking tool than just the podcast for the purpose of sharing stories.
I mean, it was many things, I have to say. So at the beginning, it was just for sharing stories. But at some point, it evolved more as a tool. And I actually saw in how many ways you can really use it.
Even though, because how many subscribers did you have back then?
I mean, it must have been like 3,000.
3,000. For specifically the podcast on YouTube?
Not on YouTube, so on Spotify.
On Spotify, you had like 3,000 subscribers. And then you say, okay, hey, I have this traffic. You want to make use of this traffic, but the underneath layer of that was you networking with people through the art of having a nice conversation in front of a camera.
Yeah.
That's smart. Actually, Ramosi used that with Gym Launch as well. So did you heard of that before, or just it happened to be that way?
No, it just actually all happened to me as I started the journey.
Yeah, so then, because now we make a small step into the next phase of your journey actually, because it started as a podcast, then you had some sponsors, or just one?
Just one.
Just one? You had that one sponsor, but then you shifted your business model. How did you come up with that idea actually?
So that was quite a funny story. I was invited to speak at an event about podcasting in general. And one of my previous guests, she got in touch with me and wanted to speak after the event. And we had a short conversation where I figured out that she was interested in starting her own podcast. But actually, I noticed that it would be way better for her to just guest on other shows, because that's a way easier workload to take on, right, as a coach yourself, instead of starting your own immediately. And she became my first client.
So then you started a podcast agency with as purpose getting your clients onto other podcasts.
Exactly, yeah. So I had like a whole coaching package in the beginning as well, where I would help to set up a funnel, that they would tell the story in the right way. I would create a media kit, and then I would guarantee them 10 bookings within 6 months.
Where did you learn the skill for that?
Honestly, it was just learning by doing.
Loving and going.
Exactly, yeah. It was just trying out different approaches and messages, and just common sense, I would say.
What were some of the fuck-ups within that?
Um, I don't think that there were really fuck-ups. I would just say I noticed...
Mistakes. That's a nicer word.
No, I would just say that I noticed one of the challenges was for sure coordinating between both parties, because partly they would be maybe even in different time zones. And then the host expects that, you know, you kind of like follow their lead. But then if it's your client, then they expect that it's kind of convenient for them. So yeah, time coordination, also with Calendly links, took quite a long time.
Yeah, I can imagine, because specifically, like, I'm doing sales calls right now, and then I send my Calendly link, or I book someone into a Calendly link. It's like, okay, I booked in the Calendly link right now in your schedule. Can you check your mail? What time is standing there? And like, yeah, it's 4 o'clock. Okay, but do look behind what's standing there. Why is it saying Indonesian time zone? Exactly. So you do that -7. That means the appointment we set right now is 9 o'clock. It's because I'm in Indonesia right now, and that's why I check up with you.
Yeah.
So, but then the podcast, it all happened like online. So it was like a Zoom podcast, or you flew people over to places, or what was the case there?
So I actually started in person, and then at some point COVID hit, and then I had to move online.
From that point on. So then you started your podcast agency from one thing to another, and your podcast became more of a marketing tool to get to know podcasters.
Exactly.
But then you had one problem. If you have an agency, you need to do one thing to get clients.
Yeah, so I was getting clients via cold outreach,
But
I really needed to get good at sales. And I didn't do any courses or anything. So for me, it was just jumping on calls and kind of learning by doing and getting better at it as I went. And then after a while, I got like really frustrated, you know, if you don't have a good journey set up, and if you don't know what you're doing wrong, that people drop off.
because you had like 17 calls
So
before
actually,
you closed your first client.
70 before I closed my first 2.
70.
Yeah, 70.
Fuck. I get that that's frustrating, but if you look back at your call right now, can you just walk us through how you did it?
So the funny part was, one thing that I wasn't aware of was I looked very young.
Okay.
So I was jumping on the calls, and then I generally know that I look young, but I wasn't as aware of it back then. And that was one of the first things that the sales coach that I started working with, that she told me. And then I started wearing chunky earrings, I started wearing glasses and like a blazer. And already that fully changed. Like the way how people were showing up, how they would see me, it was helping so much already.
And specifically glasses, there's like a study done that if you wear glasses on a sales call, you build up more trust automatically, because people with glasses seem smarter and you have more authority.
Yeah.
That's literally like, when I have a sales call, I always wear my glasses. That's like it's literally a psychological trick to
Yeah, it's
help
smart.
people. But if you don't know it, then yeah, how you appear on camera.
Exactly.
So that was one of the lessons, because at some point after 70 calls, you said, fuck, I need to learn his help. What do I need to do? You got a coach.
Exactly, yeah.
What are the main things you learned from that coach?
So it was how important looks are, and then as well, the power of video. Like, she had a concept back then where you recorded those short form videos, just giving a tip about something. So in my case, it was a tip about podcast guesting, and I would just record a video every week and post it on LinkedIn. And already that was as well super valuable. One thing that I wasn't doing was having like an email sequence where I was tackling objections. All these kind of small things that you just learn along the way.
And what if you would set up a sales system right now, because that's sometimes a thing you do within
Yeah.
the companies that you work with as a marketing consultant. What were the steps that you go through that you didn't do then, but that you would do right now?
Specifically for a marketing agency, for a podcast casting agency.
Yeah.
So, yeah, one thing is for sure video, because once you put out video, you can build trust on skill, and people show up and they already feel like they know you, right? Compared to when you just message people, there's way more skepticism about it. So that's number one, incorporating video in your strategy. And number two is having a really good high converting landing page, right? Who's the service for? What are the outcomes that they're gonna get? Where you have really strong testimonials, and that you really test this page, right? You test the traffic, you test the headline, you test an image, a static image via video. So I find that super important. And then apart from that, to have a multi-channel approach, so that you not only maybe reach out to people on LinkedIn, but then you have long-form video content on YouTube as well, targeting certain keywords. You have some short-form video content on, can be TikTok or Instagram as well, to not have all of your eggs in one basket.
Yeah. And in that way, in general, it takes 7 to 8 contact moments before someone even recognizes your face. Just recognition. Imagine what it would take to build trust. Well, it takes 5 to 10 hours of consumption time, but it's like the multi-channel approach is really important, and that's something that you learned through the sales coach that you had?
Yes, I would say through the sales coach, but then also through my entire journey. And one of the best things as well is to obviously have a really strong content strategy where you show up regularly. Because, for example, so let's say we're talking about LinkedIn, so then you add new people in your network, you text them, and then, once you post regularly, either text posts, carousels, video posts, they actually get exposed to you.
So define a good content strategy from a bad one.
So I think most of the time people often just post about the benefit. You'll get this, you'll get that, but they don't spend enough time to connect with someone emotionally. And so that your target customer feels that you kind of feel their pain.
So when you think of a content strategy, when you do your content calendar, which part of my client am I speaking to in which post? Is this like a pain post? Is this like a problem post? Is that what you mean, or?
Yeah, so I would say in the end, it comes really down to having a good content strategy is about the hooks. That's one, because if you don't have a good hook, people don't read the rest, right? Also, for example, if you take on YouTube, there are specific hooks that work.
Like what?
With the title or not. So, for example, it's not luck. It's not luck, it's a concept. So, for example, I started a YouTube channel and grew it to 10,000 followers to prove it's not luck. That's a hook, and the more you kind of work with those hooks, the better it is. So that's one. And then the second part is to have just really strong copy where you dive into someone's pain and their feeling.
Okay, and because you're recording YouTube videos yourself as well, so we're going to dive into that part of you later. But one question within that, how do you do that with scripting? Because really good copy is really important.
Yeah.
But what I have within my own videos, if I just have a script and I do it line by line by line by line, it feels really unnatural. And even though like my background is as an actor, so it's not that I don't have experience within that. Literally was what I studied to become.
Yeah.
But it feels really unnatural. It feels really like static. But if I just put down bullet points and I know what I can talk about, literally like in this conversation, we structure the conversation a bit, but we also have an actual conversation right now. You can free flow way better and it comes across way better. What's your perspective on that?
To be honest, I think it really depends on what kind of type you are, because for some people it's actually better to have every word written out, and then it's just about practicing it in front of the mirror with your whole body so it comes across the right way. Because obviously if you just like read it line by line, you won't have energy. But then if you use your hands, and then if you go up and down with your voice and you become a bit of more of an entertainer, then it totally works.
Of course, definitely. That's what I did when I needed to learn my lines as well. Like, okay, now I say this line like a pirate. Now I say this line like a spy. Now I say this line. So you become playing with your lines.
Yeah.
And that's really fucking important. But what do you mean with it depends on your character or on your type?
Yeah, I mean that some people are a bit more free-flowing when it comes to speaking, whereas other people like to have everything written out. And I think that also partly depends on your background and your experience. Because if you have already 3 years of experience in your field, you might have more knowledge about the subject, and it might be easier for you to just go off of bullet points and still provide a lot of value. If you're talking about a little bit a new subject for you, it might be harder to improvise.
Fair enough. I mean, then you're just bluffing or talking about things you don't know, so then it becomes a bit harder. So okay, you've learned about marketing, you've learned about sales through the skill sets of your agency, but at some point you were missing something.
Yeah, at some point I decided that I miss a team. Like, it is a lot of fun to have an agency on your own, but as well it can be sometimes lonely. And I just noticed that it would be fun to be able to leverage internal resources and not to just learn everything on my own. And that's when I decided to go into freelancing consulting and to go actively in companies.
Yeah, and then you just say, hey, I've learned this from all the skill sets that I built it up during this experience. How can I help you, or how do you approach that?
Well, this is like an approach where you're focused on yourself, right? It's way more, back then, I built up a bit of a network. I went on multiple different coffee chats with people, and I was just trying to figure out where I would fit in best. And what actually happened was that a friend of mine, he was part of a software as a service collective, and they had one client which was then an employee referral software company, and they needed someone in partnerships and marketing, actually. And it was just a personal introduction where that friend of mine was like, hey, Agnes, I think you'd be a great fit there. Should I connect you with one of the founders? And then I jumped on a call with one of the founders, and we actually immediately got along super well, just on a personal level. And we ended the conversation in the sense where I would write down what I like doing in terms of activities, and then he wrote down the things where they needed help in, and then we just met in the middle.
Yeah. One really interesting thing that I hear throughout your whole story, and that I've heard in many other stories as well from people that were guests on the podcast, is it comes all through people.
Yeah.
Hey, wait, I knew that person from the co-working, and that introduced me to a coach. hey, and now through LinkedIn and through the podcast, I know more people, and I can introduce you to that one, and I can introduce you, like, what would you have to say about that? Like, what specific role do you think people had in your whole journey?
So the interesting part is, I think in the end, if you want to become successful, obviously there are many ways to do it, but one way is through building an audience, right? And that's also in the end what a company does. They build up a customer base, they build up an email list, they put out content on social media, and they build up a community, right, on these pages. And in the end, the bigger your community is, the more leverage you have. So whenever then you have a problem or you need something, you can just post in your community. These people already know, like, and trust you, and they will help you. So
actually the podcasting audience, the podcasting network, because then audience and network, they're the same thing in that phrase.
yeah, exactly.
I would say. And then, so in a way, when you talk to people one-on-one, you include them into your audience, and then you have like the marketing strategies, one-to-many, one-to-one. But both ways helps you collect the audience, and that same audience is the thing that got you where you are right now with the contractors, with the contract work that you do as a marketing consultant, all through people.
Yeah, exactly. Because, I mean, think about it. Let's say if you also go into a company, then you have one specific role and you potentially work with so many different departments, and all these people get to know, like, and trust you as well. So you can leverage that later on.
And I think specifically within all the work that you did and the work that you do right now, as a sales rep, no, as a marketing consultant, you have a lot of people skills. So can you define people skills for you?
People skills, for me, one thing that I learned, which is super important, is actually appreciation and gratitude. So when you work in a stressful environment, it's really easy to just go in and be like, hey, I need X, Y, and Z from you yesterday, right?
Fair.
But then just taking a moment and saying thank you. And in some companies, you even have a gratitude channel where you just, appreciate this person for how they helped you. I think that can go a very long way.
So one of the key aspects you would say is giving gratitude to someone when they do a good job or when they work extremely hard and you see it and you notice it, just say it to the person.
Yes, say it to the person and just try to support them in whatever way you can as well. So for example, if I have certain friends as well, when they post on LinkedIn, I at least try to like the post or comment, whatever it is, right, to just help the people around you as well.
And how do you manage that because at some point within a company, you need to hit your targets, you need to hit your KPIs, and if you're not on schedule, if you're not on time, it's not good for the company. So how do you structure that in a way that you can also be understanding in your communication, that you also can give gratitude, but also can be strict on what needs to be done?
So I would say the gratitude part is, I think it's it happens over time once people actually deliver, right? And they help you in a sense, they help you solve a small problem, whatever it is. So I don't think that you really need to plan it, right? Like some people maybe do. Some people are like, okay, maybe I need to put a half an hour blocker in my calendar on a Friday where I just say thank you and give gratitude. That's a strategy that you could do if you kind of forget,
No, I actually think that's a really good idea for a lot of people. And specifically for men, I think, because by nature, women are better with the emotional side of people. But for men, like, you forget it. You forget stuff a lot.
Yeah.
Speaking from experience here.
And nowadays, I think it's easier than ever because you can just share your thoughts with ChatGPT and be like, hey, write 10 personal messages to each of them, and that's it, right? And then you get the output and you copy each message, and people are happy about it.
So through your whole journey, you learn people skills. Gratitude is a really important part of that. Then you actually became a marketing consultant as a freelancer because you missed working with all the teams.
Yes.
The social part of it. For how long have you been doing that? Because you do it specifically for companies to scale from 10 million to 100 million, right?
Yeah. So at this point, it's around 4 years.
4 years. What are some of the mistakes that you made and the things you learned from that?
I think one of the biggest is always about, so whenever you work on a project, is to set clear expectations about the scope of the project.
Can you define scope for the people who don't know that?
Yeah, so what the deliverables are and what you need in order to deliver, also internally, right? Because often it can happen that people expect more, right? So let's say, for example, if you are working with someone who is a video editor, and then in the beginning you sit down together and the video editor, for example, tells you you're gonna get your file back within 5 days and you get 2 revisions and that's it, right? That's kind of our contract. And in the end, that's one of the most important things, is that both parties set very clear expectations of what's included in the project and what's out of scope, so what you won't do. I find that very, very important, and to be also prepared for all kind of cases. Like once you start working with someone in the beginning, it's often very positive, right? Like it's a new beginning and you...
With every relation.
Exactly.
Like if you start in a relationship with a woman or a man in your case, you always have like the honeymoon phase. I always say it's the bunny phase because that's when you like each other the most. Last 2 to 3 months, you just fuck a lot in that phase. That's like how it works in a relation, but it's like in business relations, it's the same. Not
exactly.
that you do it with your business partner, but it's like you get the point.
100%. So it's always good to be prepared for the exit as well.
Yeah, so the exit of the total agreement or the exit specifically of the honeymoon phase within the agreement that you have together?
I would say just the general exit is that everything is clear on your end and that you always also have a backup plan.
How do you structure that?
Well, you set up an agreement in the beginning, right? A legal agreement, and you set up how many days you have notice period from both sides, and that you always have that in the back of your head.
So by giving a clear scope and having the right agreements, and also be prepared that at some point after 2 to 3 months you get out of the honeymoon phase of that relation, you know reality will hit hard, and you know like things will come to an end by contract, but also by the mental state, because you get to like the better you know someone, or the better you know a relation, the better you know a company, the more shit you see.
I would say that things don't change because of your personal mindset, but because within companies there are so many stakeholders, and then you have changes in leadership, in priorities right now, where the brand is headed, like which product is a priority right now maybe as well. And based on these factors, your corporation might also change.
Fair enough. And you just can prepare yourself by that, by a legal contract. So that's nice. At least if you listen to her, because she actually has the experience here. So it would be smart to do that. I know definitely when I listen back to this, I write down a couple of points like, okay, I need to do that. I need to do that. But that's how it works. I learned by talking to people. I'm just you a couple of years back now.
Exactly. Yeah, I know. That's great.
And it's funny because in the pre-talk that we had, we call that at some point when you come to the contract, towards the end of the contract, you have like the bridge. You either have two options there, right? Go internal in the company and get a contract from them, or leave them behind and go on to the next.
Yeah, so most of the time, if you are a consultant, at some point, they often want to hire you. So that's one thing that you'll have to think about. Or, like I said before, there are partly changes within the company because of stakeholders. And also there are a lot of changes within the economy, right? So they might cut costs suddenly and decide, okay, they're gonna kill your project. And that's something you just have to keep in the back of your head and always be prepared for it.
And then there's one big secret that you had in mind and that you're actively working on right now that can help you save your ass when it comes to the contracts that will come to an end. What's that secret?
So a while ago, I restarted my YouTube channel and I started putting out content about how to use certain AI tools and how to leverage them from a marketing perspective, because I realized how important it really is to build your brand.
And I think that's the scope of 2025. Personal brands are going to be more and more important. And you also had a reasoning behind that because of a power dynamic shift. Can you dive into that?
Yeah, so I think that there is a lot of shifting. So I think that there are a lot of things changing in the market because of AI and automation and the AI agents that are coming. So a lot of tech companies, they want to simplify the business and automate everything, which means that a lot of roles that are currently within the company will become obsolete. For example, I've already seen that, for example, copywriters are being let go, right? Because you can have trained custom GPTs for every type of copy that you need. So
that's exactly what I'm doing with my own company now. So
there you go. And that's just natural, which means that obviously there will be new roles and there's a lot of need for AI and automation experts, but also, for example, coding is becoming easier than ever, right? For example, you can check the graph how developer vacancies have gone down, within the last year, and because they're just not needed anymore. And I think that there will be different vacancies for sure, but there will be less as well. It's like maybe before you needed 30 people in the marketing team to run the whole company, but now you can do it with 10, right? But then at the same time, the exciting part about this is it's going to be easier than ever to build a product, to build your own business if you know how to leverage technology. So I do think that there will be a shift going on to, if you have entrepreneurial skills and you can leverage tech, you will win.
Define entrepreneurial skills.
So you know how to build an audience, you know marketing, you know how to sell, you know how to build products. But then if you are more stuck kind of in an employee mindset, and then especially in tech, then I don't think that you'll be in the best position.
What does an employee mindset mean to you?
Well, that you are just really focused on coming to work, doing all the tasks that you need to, and then you're leaving and you're not educating yourself further.
Okay, so it's about growth, it's about growing, it's about leveraging, and it's about adapting to what needs to be done to actually go beyond scale within all the technology that's coming.
Yeah, so the most important part is to understand and learn the new technologies that are out there and to figure out how you can apply them, right? Like either for your company or for yourself.
Yeah. I really want to dive into more and more because now you're back in the YouTube phase. But I saw some people knocking at the door, so I think we're a bit over broadcast time now. So to fast forward, sorry for that, because we need to book the studio a bit longer, but that's how it happens. To fast forward, what's next to build your 1 million solopreneur brand?
Yeah, so
We're making the end right now. We're ending it right now, it's fine. Couple of seconds. Yes? Okay, cool.
So can you repeat the question?
What would need to be done to build your 1 million solopreneur brand?
Yes, so actually it's about really growing my audience and building my brand. That's what I'm focused on now.
So literally what we talked the whole podcast about.
Exactly.
I would say if people want to follow up with you, I'll leave everything in the description. We're kind of forced out the studio right now, which I think is a bit funny as well. But is there one thing that you want to say in the end to everyone?
Yeah, I would say go out there and build your brand.
Follow her on YouTube because it's some pretty useful stuff. Check it out a bit as well.
You can always do that as well, of course.
All right, then visionaries, I would say check you later. Ciao.